Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Mike Flores, and for years I have been recording myself during my tattoos. I actually don't know really why I started doing it. I think I was wanting to do more social media content. Back then it was way easier because you would just record what you did and put it up. But now things are way trickier. And I have hundreds and hundreds of these kind of top-down shots recorded with the GoPro that I recorded from all my tattoos from about 7-8 years ago, and it's taking up a lot of space on my computer. I was thinking maybe I can upload them to YouTube and save space on my hard drives. Yeah, I also thought it would be fun to kind of go over what I was doing and kind of look to see how I used to tattoo back then and the things that I used to do and see how things have changed. Yeah, so here we go. Right now it looks like I'm lining everything with a 3-round liner. I used to use, I think it was Cheyenne's 3-round liner, just the normal base version, but I believe their normal version is like slightly bug pinned. Nowadays I use 0.25s, and that's all I use basically, and sometimes even smaller than that. The 3s I used back then, I feel like they would just get a little too thick over time. I also used to use like straight black whenever I would do like lining and stuff, and I've kind of come to find out that that also will blow out or get thicker over time. It's just not something that I like. I started doing more really tight groupings of 3-round liners, and instead of using straight black, I will use a half and half, which is like half straight black, half distilled water. But I find that that holds up way better over time. So right now I am magging in the leaves. I'm most likely using a 7 mag. My kind of go-tos were at a 7 mag, an 11 mag, and a 3-round liner. I felt like I could pretty much do anything with those needle groupings. Whenever I'm doing leaves, I tend to only use straight black because I really want like a higher contrast in the leaves to give it that look like as if it's shiny. And even when I'm shading and getting a lighter tone with straight black, it just, like the pepperiness of the black, in my opinion, looks better with the leaves. So right now, looks like I'm doing the background. I used to try to work as a printer as much as I could back then. I don't do that as much anymore, but yeah, for the background, I was most likely using like a really light tone and just building it up. And I really want to make those white spots on the leaves whiter by putting a darker tone next to it. It's not super dark. It's enough to give the leaves some room and to show that the leaves are the darkest part. I'm not trying to take away from the leaves. I'm just trying to add to the light. It's almost like toning paper. Like if you're doing a drawing on paper, usually you want to use toned paper, and the skin is already toned, but in this case the skin is technically the lightest you can go. Like even if you were to pack white into this, it's not gonna get any lighter. It's just gonna show that it's white. So in order to tone the skin, you have to put in some kind of background to make those white parts white. I know I'm not very good at talking over this. I don't really do this a lot, but I don't know. We're giving it a go. See where it goes. Yeah, so right now I'm doing more of the other leaf with the straight black. Again, trying to give it like a high contrast look. And I can see that I keep dipping into my straight black. Usually there's not a lot of black in flowers. So I try to work like that mid-tone range So in order to get some contrast in the piece, I like to go really dark with the leaves, or at least like high contrast. So like wherever it's shiny, you know, back that up with some really dark darks. Even if my reference photo doesn't have really dark leaves, I will darken them in Procreate or whatever drawing thing that you're using. I use Procreate to really separate the leaves from the flowers, because you don't want them to kind of mesh. You know, you want them to have their own space. Yeah, so I'm just tightening up all the edges, really trying to make sure everything is as crisp as it can be. You'll notice on the bottom leaf, there's like one side is like light, one side is like lined with black. I think I like to put these like dots where the sharp part of the leaves are, to kind of show that it's not just a line. Like, I don't like lining my leaves. Like, I want texture on the edges. Also with the leaves, you can see like the center of the leaves have like these like black lines. That might have even been like white or light on my reference, but you know, it's a lot harder to get a bunch of like thin white lines. So I just went the other way and just made them black. It still reads the same. So now I'm most likely using a really light gray wash, and I'm using the edge of the mag to line in the entire rose. This works way better than using like a liner or a tight 3, because even like the smallest 3 that I found still kind of builds out to be a bigger line than I want. And I'm really just wanting to find an edge to shade off of. So it's pretty safe to just get your lightest tone, get the corner of the mag, and use that single needle to kind of put in the edges to where to shade from. And then once I'm done with that, I'm coming in with like a darker midtone and putting in all the dark areas, just making sure to always shade in the direction that the petal is going, and just being really as accurate as I can be. And I'm using a midtone to fade out because I can always go back in with a darker, like the more the shadow builds up, the deeper you go into the flower, I can always come back in with a darker tone and fade that into the midtone. And the same thing with like if the rest of that petal is toned, you can just go into an even lighter gray and just tone it over. So I usually start with like a mid-tone. Yeah. So I think I have most of the rows lined in with the edge of the mag. And so there's not really going to be any wiping the stencil off. I usually try to wipe off as much of the stencil as I can. It's kind of just distracting to me. I don't know why. I've always done that. So I'll go in and I'll line the stencil, and then once the stencil's gone, I kind of just feel like now it's just like a drawing that I get to do. And I know that's kind of silly, and a lot of people work like straight, like a printer, finishing everything and never going back into it. But I feel like there's always going to be some kind of adjustment that you're going to need to do, at least for me. I guess I'm not that good. You can see that I'm shading with the petal, meaning like I'm shading with the direction of the petal that it's folding. It's super important. I mean, not just with flowers, but with anything. Like, you want to shade in the direction that your whatever the thing is moving, to help give it shape. It's very rare that I will like go in a different direction, and if I do, it's kind of to add maybe some like chaos or something that I don't want to be super structured. When I'm doing these, there's so much to think about. Sometimes you don't even realize that you're thinking about it. You're just kind of doing. I love doing flowers and roses. In the beginning, they were really good practice, and they just look really good. and they're not super hard to sell. You know, like everybody wants flowers. You can add them to basically anything and make it work. You can make a flower look masculine or super feminine. I mean, they're so versatile. So I did a lot of them, and that's where I got a lot of my practice in, and trying to show shapes and how things move. So yeah, just being really careful, always remembering to shade in the direction that whatever shape you're working on is flowing in that direction. I can't tell you how much it affects the outcome of the entire piece, of like how you're shading. Even if you're using like a liner, probably even more so. If you're using a liner, try to like shade in the direction of whatever is flowing. So I remember specifically at this time, I was messing around with a lot of backgrounds and trying to see what worked best in a lot of scenarios. So my first initial thought when I was doing backgrounds at first was just like, oh, just give it a background and that'll be it, you know? It ended up looking super boring when I would just do one solid color on the entire background. So I started playing around with like lost edges on backgrounds, or like kind of trying to give things depth. But like you'll see later on, that main bottom left petal, I kind of gave it a dark edge to give it a, you know, some kind of edge. I didn't want to line it because I thought it would be too strong and put too much attention to that area. So I ended up throwing in some shading behind it, and it worked out really well because it just made it kind of fade a little bit more towards the back and just pull your attention a little less than like the center of the flowers is where I want most of the attention. That's why I'm like really trying to be specific and get all these edges really crisp and sharp. It's where I want the eye to go, and that's where I'm trying to control the eye to go, and giving it a bunch of contrast in that center area will help that. I've done a whole piece, and if there's not enough attention going to one area, I'll get a mid-tone and just cover an entire area to push it away to give it slightly less contrast. And it's something I've experimented a lot with, and I've just recently probably got more comfortable with it. It's crazy because this was like 8 years ago. But yeah, around this time I remember being known for doing roses and clocks, and I know a lot of people hate doing clocks and roses, which is crazy because I still find them fun to do. I went through a little bit of a period where like I was tired of doing the numbers, but it wasn't even really I was tired of doing clocks. It was more the expectation that people wanted this big tattoo in one day that I wasn't really a fan of. It was so I never really got tired of doing the actual tattoo. It was just the expectation of, you need to finish this. And I mean, honestly, those clocks take so long to do because you have to be so precise, because it's not like an organic thing. It's very structured, and it's mentally taxing. Yeah, so same thing over and over again. I'm just here shading in with the mid-tone. Is pretty much my base, going behind every flower, trying to make sure each stroke is like consistent. I mean, consistency is key. It's really showing, it's how you make something look really clean. Like if you're having a problem with everything looking spotty, like you have to just make sure that every stroke that you're doing is intentional, and you're doing it for a reason, not just to fill in an area or to shade something back. Like the only time I'll ever put in stuff in like a circular motion most of the time is if I'm packing in a color like to make it one solid color where the direction doesn't matter. But for the most part, 99% of the time, you should be moving in that direction. If a petal's going up and then to the left, you need to shade in that direction every time. So right now I'm going back with that edge of the mag, probably a really light wash. Even on the leaves, I'm going back and just really being careful to look at my reference, make sure I'm not like messing anything up to stay on track, because you want to be accurate. Like I said, in the center of these roses is where also I feel like a lot of people just like fall short. But yeah, getting the rest of my stencil in, and then once the rest of my stencil is in, and I'll wipe off the stencil so I don't have to look at it anymore. Yeah, there it goes. See, I just wiped it. I knew it was coming. This was 8 years ago. I tend to like work, usually like I'll find a section to work on, like either the center of the rose or the outside of the rose, and then I usually leave the main bigger petals for the last part. I try to get in the center just so I have like a frame of reference, and then I will go in and try to do the background so that I know how I'm going to want the petals to look versus the background. You know what I mean? Because like a white flower would be different with a black background or a gray background versus a dark flower with like a light background. You have to decide and set the tone for whatever you're doing. Looks like I have the 7 mag here, just kind of going in, getting all those shapes. Again, being patient, accurate. Every little mark needs to be where it's supposed to go. And also whenever you're shading up to an edge, you want to always try to like shade off that edge as much as you can to minimize, like I see a lot where shapes don't or shading doesn't go all the way to the edge, or if it does, it's like it'll be smooth, and then the closer it gets to the edge, it's kind of like not packed in as well. And that goes back to being like consistent with how you're shading. So at this time, pretty sure I'm going in with like a mid-tone. I usually work from like mid to dark mid to light mid to darks to lights. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm working inwards and then going outwards. So I save my ultralights usually towards the end to fade off of the midtones that I already put in. And then I shade from the darks. I can always go back in and blend into the midtone with a dark, and that's super easy to do. And usually at the end, I will go in with my darks, like my absolute darkest darks, or something I want to amplify or make last longer, you know, because if you're using a light gray to shade off a petal, and I mean, if you've seen how your grays heal up over time, it's sometimes better to just push it a little bit more so that right close to the edge is showing more contrast still. So and that's just for like tattooing to last, you know, over time. Because it's weird, because you have to think about the piece, the art piece, but then you also have to think about how is this going to look over a long period of time, and then how are those edges going to hold up over that period of time. And sometimes I'll go in and I'll decide like, oh, this probably could use like maybe a dark line right here. I mean, I won't go straight black, but I'll usually like a 3/4 cup mixed with distilled water, or 1 step lighter depending on what I'm doing. But a line is going to hold up way better than like a shaded edge. And if that shaded edge doesn't have enough contrast to like last the test of time, then I will put a line in there if that's where I want an edge to last over time, if that makes any sense. It's so complicated. Tattooing's so complicated, but it's fun. And yeah. One of my favorite things to do is, you know, like after you're done with the tattoo and you have your reference, just put away your reference and just look at the tattoo. Like sometimes we get too stuck looking at the reference, thinking that it needs to be exactly like the reference, but it really doesn't. And it sometimes just needs some more love and looking at the tattoo itself, and make some on the spot decisions to see if areas need more to be darker or to be lined, like I was talking about earlier, or more texture. I used to be such a slave to my reference, and I still am in a sense, but it's more like I just treat it like what it's supposed to be is a reference and not like the end all be all. This is what it needs to look like. And that's whenever you will start developing as an artist. Really just try things, you know. One thing I really like to do, because I don't really like taking too much chances whenever it's just on skin, is I will put this on Procreate and I will do all my ideas, and I try to get as close to a final product on Procreate as possible. And I'm sure like once you grow more as an artist, you know, you will need to do that less and less. I still do it all the time. I like knowing what it's gonna be like prior to tattooing it, because I feel like it's such a permanent thing. And for the longest time, I would get super nervous before tattooing anybody, and I didn't want to make any mistakes. And you know, you're the one that's closest with this tattoo, and you know every little piece of it. And if you mess something up and they're going to go look at it, I don't know, they're looking at it. I mean, I see all the tiny mistakes, but they just see like a piece of art. It's really hard to get over that, but eventually you will. If I did, you will. Yeah, other than the tattooing, I would think the design, having a nice design that flows with the body is really important. I know for this tattoo, I just like stenciled it on and I didn't draw anything on, but most of the time I'm drawing something onto the skin, and that's to help flow with the body. Because I feel like, at least me, I can see really quickly whenever people just, you know, slap on a stencil and it just looks like it was placed with the stencil. It doesn't fit the body as well as it could. And that like almost over tattoo technique is just as important as the tattoo itself. Having a good design and making it fit the body. Here I'm going back and making those decisions where I'm like, okay, this edge is gonna need to hold over time more, so I'm gonna put in some ink right here. Oh, this is perfect example. Throwing in some leaves because I felt like it needed a little more. It wasn't fitting the arm as well as I wanted it to. Going in with that straight black. There's not a lot of pure black in this tattoo, so I'm putting as much into the leaves in the background as I can, just so you have like that 30% black, 30% gray, 30% skin, trying to stay around that, which I think is like pleasing to the eye. You know, you want some balance. You also want enough skin for the tattoo to breathe. So now I'm really going and highlighting those dark areas. You can see that it's not a line, but it's just the dots, adding to the leaf texture that I'm trying to do. Reinforcing with more black, really trying to pop out the flower from the background. I incorporated this rose a little bit with the flower that was already on her on the right, and I just added a shadow just so it doesn't look like I just stuffed this tattoo onto her arm without considering the tattoos around it. So now I'm just working on the background. I'm really trying to blend in this like lighter tone. It's probably like my lighter mid-tone, and I know it looks dark right now, but when it heals out, you know, it's gonna be like a soft gray, and then I go in later and reinforce some of those darker parts that I do want to be like a mid-tone. Yeah, but background is one of those things where you have to go either 100% into it or don't do it at all. And I tend most of the time to go hard with the backgrounds. 8 years ago. It's crazy. Yeah, so you can see I'm leaving in a little bit of where the light source is coming from. I want it to be on the edge of those leaves just to pop them out a little bit more, give them more contrast. And then just filling out the background. And now you can see how that top petal is just popping out way more. Again, this isn't like a super dark black. This is It's really light actually. I'm just working it in there to make it a solid mid-tone, so it's nice and soft when it heals and not super dark. Also, I'm not going in and just hammering in the gray to be one tone out throughout the whole background. I'm like, if there's like a dark area with the leaves, I'm kind of fading that gray into the dark area to maybe give it more contrast in that area. Or you can do the opposite, and if there's like a black say like there's a stem and you don't want that stem to pop out as much, you can just take that mid-tone and just brush it out the whole thing, and that would help a lot. I usually take a break towards the end and just like let it rest, get your eyes away from it, and then during this time I'll get some Bactine and soak a Bactine towel and just let it sit over the tattoo, so that way it's nice and numb, so they usually don't feel any of this last part. But yeah, I just want to rest my eyes and kind of just go be really picky, go back in there and just like look at every little corner, every edge, if anything could be smoothened out. And it's really important to like walk away for a little bit because you've been staring at it all day. And now I'm doing some white ink. I try not to go too heavy on the white ink. I'm not really a big fan of like packing in a lot of white, but I use white ink for multiple reasons. One is to show like wet or metallic things, and another reason I use it is to hold edges or to separate edges from bleeding into each other over time. So that's what I'm doing here, is I don't want those blacks to eventually merge, so I'm like putting like a little white wall up. And it also helps bring out the edges if that's what you're wanting to do. But I try to use the skin tone as the lightest part of the tattoo 99% of the time. Like that's what's more important. Yep, just going in, putting the final touches in with the white. It came out super soft. My client was super happy with it. I was super happy with it. And yeah, this was fun. It's kind of strange to do. I'm not used to doing this, but I have literally hundreds of tattoos that I have recordings like this that I think I'm gonna upload them. I might even upload them to a second channel to not muddy it up. I don't know, I haven't really decided, but if this is something that you like or something that interests you, please let me know. Again, I have a bunch of tattoos, so if there's any that you want to see, let me know, and I'll try to make the next one those. But yeah, y'all take it easy.